Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 2023 SpringDocs screening. My name is Armando Zamudio, and I am the Public Programs and Events Coordinator here at IDA. For our blind and low vision attendees, I'm going to identify myself. I am a light-skinned Mexican-American with messy hair, wearing a white t-shirt, black jacket, and sitting in an office space. Thank you to our media partners Variety and KCRW for sponsoring our 2023 SpringDocs. This evening, we'll have a conversation between director and producers Davina Pardo, Leah Wolchok, and moderated by Variety's feature editor Jenelle Riley, whose film Judy Blume Forever premiered at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival and currently streaming on Prime Video. To help us grow by donating and or interested in joining IDA's global network of documentary professionals, please visit documentary.org/membership. To see more amazing films like this, please visit www.documentary.org/SpringDocs. Now, before we get started, I'd like to give a quick brief land acknowledgement. We recognize the Gabrielino, Tongva, and Chumash people as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land, water, and cultural resources in the unceded territory of Los Angeles. Thank you so much to Andrea Lust for ASL interpreting. And with that, I pass it on to Jenelle. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on a great movie. I'd love to start at the beginning because I think we all have like sort of our Judy Blume gateway book or story. Like my best friend was suspended in 6th grade for passing around a copy of Forever. I'm curious, I know one of you was a fan coming into this project and the other one kind of had to do more catching up. What was sort of each of your relationship to Judy Blume when this project came your way?
So I'm the one who was thank you all. Thank you for having us. Thank you for doing this. Thank you all for being here. Yes, I was a huge Judy Blume reader as a kid.
Okay.
It's funny because we asked everybody the same question, right?
Yeah.
Like and I can't remember
Really?
what the gateway book was. I just remember her always being there. The books were always there. I remember where I sat when I read them. We had a couch on the landing between my room and my parents' room, and there was this cozy chair that was the reading chair. Instead of sitting in the chair, I would sit between the chair and the wall because it was like a perfect child-sized space to read in. So that's where I sat and read Judy Blume books. But I don't remember what the first one was. I had so many favorites. Margaret was particularly meaningful because I was an early bloomer. I got my period before my big sister got hers.
No, did that cause tension in the house? Yeah.
Yes. She definitely had something to hold over my head. And I had something to hold over hers, I guess. But yeah, just opening up that book and being able to have a conversation with the characters that I wasn't having with my own friends. I had so much shame and embarrassment around puberty. That book was an especially formative one, as for so many people, I think.
So what was sort of the impetus? Is this a dream project you've been wanting to do for some time? Or was there something that specific that sort of spurred you on into saying, like, now's the time to make a Judy Blume documentary?
I hadn't thought a lot about the books since I had read them as a kid, and then I introduced them to my kids about 5 years ago through an audiobook. We were on a really long road trip to Nova Scotia from New York, so it was like a 17-hour drive, and I decided to play Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing to pass the time. And Judy narrates that series herself. It's an incredible series to listen to if you're ever in a car with kids or just on your own. And so I hit play and was hearing her voice for the first time. And suddenly thinking about the woman behind the books. I had always been very connected to the characters and the stories, but had never thought a lot about Judy Blume. And suddenly I wanted to know, what happened to Judy Blume? Where is she? What's she doing? What's her story? And that eventually turned into wanting to make the film.
So Leah, did you come to Judy Blume later in life, or did you read any of her books when you were younger?
I'm a late bloomer in every sense of the word. Unlike Davina, I didn't get my period until I was 16. So I had a lot of shame about my body and about puberty, but because I was on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I also grew up in Jacksonville, Florida in the 80s, at a time when Judy's books were seen as taboo. They were seen as inappropriate. Girls' bodies were seen as shameful, women's bodily autonomy. All these things that I'm saying now are all happening again in my home state of Florida. So I internalized a lot of that shame, and I didn't read her books because I thought I wasn't supposed to. I mean, somehow we were all passing around V.C. Andrews books. I don't know if any of you have read Flowers in the Attic.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what we were passing under our 5th grade desks, not Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, which would have changed my life if, as a flat-chested 10 and 11-year-old, I had read a book about a girl who was questioning her relationship to her parents and her friends and God and her body. I think I would have been, much more comfortable with who I was had I read that book. I think that book was such a gift to generations of readers. And I feel like I can't believe I wasn't part of that club. So when Davina asked me if I wanted to direct this film with her, in part, I was like, I had promised myself I was never making another documentary after Very Semi-Serious, which is a great film, but like almost broke me, almost killed me. And in part, I said, there must be thousands of women out there who would like do anything to be able to make a documentary about their hero, Judy Blume. And I'm not one of them. I don't have this deep childhood nostalgic connection to her work. I'm not sure if I'm the right person, but we realized actually it would be really helpful to have a directing partner who's coming at it from an entirely different perspective. I mean, I fell in love with Judy immediately, so you can't be objective when you meet Judy Blume. She is just, she's magical. And her books are magical, even when you're discovering them for the first time as an adult.
I was going to say, I think there's kind of an advantage of coming to it with fresh eyes. Was that sort of intentional on your part?
I mean, I think I would have wanted to work, I wanted Leah to get involved either way, even if she had been a Judy Blume super fan. But I do think it was a huge help to have a diversity of perspective on the work. That childhood connection and nostalgia is so intense. I had to read and reread the book so many times in the process of making this film to be able to move away from it and to be able to think about the books in terms of their place in the narrative and the story, and not just have that like initial visceral reaction to going back to them. So yeah, I think it was a huge benefit.
So where did you even begin? Did you secure Judy's participation first? And if that was first, how did you do that?
That was the first step.
Yeah.
So I wrote, my own Dear Judy letter. I wish I had written one as a kid, but I never did. So as an adult, I sent her an email, and she wrote back and said, thank you for your warm email, but I don't think so. I'm tempted, but I don't think so. She didn't say no.
Right.
So I always felt like the door was open. And we stayed in touch. We wrote back and forth for about a year and a half. And then finally she said, I'm coming to New York this weekend. Can we meet? And I met Judy and George. George came along. We met for brunch on the Upper West Side and had this great long 3-hour, she was as wonderful in person as I expected her to be. It made me want to make the film even more. But I remember walking away from that meeting feeling like she's still not saying yes. Like I still haven't, she's still there. She likes me. We've connected. She's thinking about it, but I need to start building a team. I need to show her that this can happen in kind of a big way. It won't be just me as an independent filmmaker toiling slowly over many years, which is how we've always worked in the past.
Yeah.
So I went to Imagine Documentaries. Leah and I had worked with Sarah Bernstein when she was at HBO. She had recently started the documentary branch at Imagine, and they helped. That made a huge difference in giving Judy the confidence to say, yes, let's do it.
And what sort of was your pitch, or did you even know at that point? Because I think more than probably any other genre, if I can call it that, or medium, documentary is often found along the way. I know you probably have an outline or a script or ideas, but it doesn't always match the final product.
Thinking back to that first email, what the initial pitch was, I mean, it was pretty general to start. It was your coming of age story, the coming of age story of you and your readers. But over the course of that year and a half correspondence, it evolved a bit to include more of the letters that she had received over the years. Once I learned that those letters existed and learned more about them, and learned that she had long-term relationships with many of the letter writers, I talked to her about wanting that to be a part of the film, and I thought that was a part of her story that really hadn't been told before.
I love that. And the way that you incorporate the letters is so amazing. And some of the people who wrote the letters, I'm sort of curious, how as filmmakers you sort of decide, who to include, what to go after. There's probably interviews with people that we don't see, or maybe there aren't, maybe you used everyone. I just sort of love to know the process, not only the letter writers, but, some of the bigger names that you got. Because I sort of feel like when you throw out Judy Blume, a lot of people like instantly get that, and are eager to participate.
I think from the beginning, we knew we wanted to have sort of a chorus of voices that we would consider, everyone we would consider to be a reader. So we knew we wanted celebrities, content creators, women who had put female protagonists on the screen, who had sort of pushed the boundaries of what we had seen before on TV in terms of women's sexuality and women's bodies, masturbation, periods, like blood on screen. So Pen 15, girls, and we did go after the women from Broad City, but we weren't able to get them. I'm thinking of all the shows we had watched that we thought we've got to find those creators and talk to them, because we know they definitely read Judy Blume as kids, and they all felt like they couldn't have made the work they were making now if Judy Blume hadn't written what she had written in the 70s. And we also wanted to talk to authors whose work was being banned today. We never could have predicted that we would be in the moment we are now, when censorship and book banning is such a huge part of the political discourse and really has become so politicized. But we had been following the banned books list, and we did know that authors like Alex Gino and Jacqueline Woodson and Jason Reynolds that were on our dream list of people to talk to, because they are the ones writing for young people today and whose work is being banned. And we wanted to talk to contemporary middle schoolers who are reading Judy's work and see, does the work still resonate? I mean, we have our own kids who are that age, but we wanted to talk to kids who are reading her as part of their English class in 6th grade and see how the books did resonate and what parts of it didn't feel quite right, felt dated. And then the letter writers. We knew that Judy had given her archive to Yale, and that there were thousands and thousands of letters in hundreds of boxes at Yale. And we knew that she had corresponded with some of these letter writers for decades. And we also knew we couldn't contact them without Judy's permission. Judy had to be the one to introduce us. So when Judy gave her archives to Yale, she and George put really strict protections in place for the privacy of those children whose first and last names and sometimes addresses are on their letters. They wanted to preserve the original, archival documentation, but they also wanted to preserve their privacy. So we asked Judy, would you be willing to introduce us to any of these women who reached out to you from the time they were kids and who you've saved I think Lori had 80 letters in the library. And so she introduced us to Lori and to Karen. And I mean, we were so grateful that they were willing to open themselves up to us and willing to go back in time to who they were as those kids who were, you saw Karen was in a really vulnerable place in her life when she reached out to Judy. And when they wrote to Judy, they never thought they would be seeing their letters again. And so that was a process. It was a process that we spent a lot of time with them over Zoom, and we worked with a therapist to make sure that we were sort of guiding Karen through that process, especially Karen. Lori was also surprised to see her letters again, but she had, her experience with Judy was so different than what Karen had been through. Yeah. And so we wanted it to feel like it was part of her a healing process for her. And that's really, in the end, what she felt like. She came with us to Sundance. She came with us to every screening at Sundance. She had her own screening in Austin, where she lives, and back in Wisconsin, where she grew up. And she invited family and friends and colleagues. And she's, I think, really proud of the fact that she finally had a space to tell her story and speak her truth. And that was such a sort of unexpected and really meaningful part of the process for us as filmmakers, was watching that journey unfold.
That's so amazing. And there's so much in the film that is just absolutely remarkable to watch. And was there anything that you couldn't include because, it just didn't fit with the narrative, or time-wise, or sometimes things just don't flow, that you kind of wish, you'd like to give a shout out to now?
our very first shoot. So Judy said yes to doing the film in February 2020.
Oh,
Yeah. A lot of filmmakers know what that's like.
yes.
So we ended up having a very long development period, and then our first shoot was April 2021, once everyone was vaccinated. Judy was going to visit the set of Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret for the first time. And so we went to Charlotte, North Carolina to film her stepping onto the set and to interview her about what it felt like to, you know, after holding on to this book for 50 years, to finally be letting go of it, and what it might, you know, what her anticipation and feelings were about seeing this character come to life on screen for the first time. And when she walked onto the set, you know, everyone stopped what they were doing. They were mid scene. She had, you know, got a standing ovation. It was such a rock star welcome. And Leah and I both started crying, like had goosebumps up and down our bodies. It was such an incredible moment. And I remember thinking, this is definitely the end of the film.
Yeah.
And it's not the end of the film, as you saw, but it was one of those, yeah, that was a hard one to let go of, but it didn't, we had so many endings. It was contributing to a feeling of multiple endings that the film couldn't have.
How many hours of footage did you have between interviews with Judy and other people, and also some of the archival things that you go through? I can't even imagine where you began.
Do you know how many hours we had? I don't know. I feel like it was far less than other independent projects we've done. Like the percentage of what we shot to what we used in the final film feels like it was a much smaller ratio. I don't know. I mean, we did sort through so much archival footage. Judy and George, before we could even get into the Yale Library, Judy and George sent us a drive with all of Judy's media appearances over the years and all of the speeches she's given over the years. And I mean, there must be hundreds of hours of Judy's media appearances, but we didn't actually shoot. I don't feel like we actually shot that much.
It was a lot of interview. I'm trying to think of how many hours of Judy sit down.
Yeah.
It was about 5 days.
Wow. And who's doing the interview? Is it one of you, both of you? Do you trade off?
We traded off. We started one day, then the next day, and then we decided we would do like half a day, the morning and then the afternoon. I don't know how Judy did it for the entire day, but we would have a break in the midday, and one of us would take the morning, one would take the afternoon. And then with the readers that we interviewed in front of the wallpaper, with all those fun props, I think packed in sometimes 4 in a day. Typically we did 2 or 3, and we would always just alternate. It's hard to switch gears and interview someone for, you know, an hour and a half. Some of them, I mean, we devoted an entire day to Lori and an entire day to Karen, but everyone else was just, you know, an hour and a half or so.
I get the feeling that, you know, having seen this movie and just from what I've heard, Judy is a very outgoing, open person. But when you're speaking to her, you're getting her to really open up on camera, and I think you should take some credit for that, because there's a difference about people being open in person and being open when there's a giant camera staring at them. How do you sort of go about putting your subjects at ease?
I mean, well, we had this Davina built that relationship with Judy over 1.5 years before Judy even said yes. And then we had, really, because of the long development period, we were emailing her, we were on the phone with her, we were over Zoom. We did meet her in the park one time with masks on. But I think we come at it from a perspective of listening. And I know that could be frustrating for a crew and for producers, because we do let people tell their story, because I think it's really important for people to feel heard when you're interviewing them, not just pepper them with questions. So I think we let her. She talked a lot about her childhood. She talked a lot about her grandmothers and her brother and her dad and her mom. And we knew we weren't always going to use it in the film, but it felt like really important to Judy to be able to share all those stories with us. And then we of course, we were asking her questions and guiding her. But I think the listening, and I think making it feel like it was a conversation. We always try to do in an interview. So if she was, starts going in one direction, we'll gently guide her, but also respond to where she's going. And I think, but she is just so open and honest. There's like really nothing that's off limits. I mean,
Yeah, you probably knew going into this you weren't going to like uncover any deep, dark secrets because she's told us everything, hasn't she? Either in fiction or in interviews. You did mention the crew, and I'd love to talk about, sort of the behind the scenes of making the film, because I believe you had a largely female-centric filmmaking team, and also, all different kinds of ages. What did all those different generations, genders, types of people, how did those perspectives within the production sort of help guide the process?
I feel like we were in constant conversation with our team about coming of age and adolescence, and we knew everyone's first period story. We knew it was a very close knit group, and we had a sound recordist who I want to say is in her 70s, and who didn't have a connection, knew the name and sort of knew the cultural context, but hadn't read the books. And then we had a very young PA, a guy who also hadn't read the books, but who brought this incredible energy and was so excited to be learning about the books for the first time. So I want to say it felt like family, but it's so cliche, but it did. And I think that's one of the things we love about making documentaries and making films, the collaboration. That's why we have two directors. Obviously, we're people who like collaborating.
For each of you, what ended up being, I guess, the most challenging moment? It could be, a moment in an interview. It could be a filmmaking thing. It could be finding the right piece of footage. I'm just sort of curious, I love to hear, your biggest challenge and how you overcame it.
I think maybe, one of the hardest moments was actually letting one of the books go, which was Iggy's House. We reference it in the beginning of the film. It was the first chapter book that Judy sold, that Dick Jackson edited and that Bradbury Press published. And it was really the book that launched her career. And it's a book that Judy told us, I felt so naive writing that book. I would rewrite it completely differently today. It's just, she didn't seem super proud of it. But when we interviewed Jason Reynolds, he spent almost the entire interview talking about what a masterpiece Iggy's House is. And Iggy's House is the story of a racist cul-de-sac in New Jersey in the 60s, and a black family moves into an all-white street. And it's told from the perspective of this little girl, this little white girl, and how she's very naively trying to make friends with the black kids that move into her street and trying to teach all the adults around her that they should be accepting of this new family. And I think what Jason felt was that this is a book that just illustrates so beautifully and in such perfect language, how complicated it is for us to talk about race, how we can't talk about race. And that book was written in 1969, and still today, and he says in the film, we still can't talk about race, which is why now his books are taken off the shelves of libraries and schools across the country because of how much fear parents have about, their kids learning about the truth of our complicated history in this country, or complicated racist history in this country. And so I think Davina and I both really wanted to find a way to work that book into the beginning of the film and then bring it back in the end of the film when we get to the contemporary censorship section. And we couldn't figure out a way to do it. We needed to get to, for the narrative, we needed her to write Margaret sooner. We needed that to come earlier in the film, and then the letters to come earlier. And so we really condensed that and never found a way. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge, was letting that go and knowing that there's a really important piece of work that Judy made that people don't talk about still. It's just a book that people don't talk about as much because it's not about puberty. It's not about sex. There are no orgasms in the book, but it's really important. And to have someone like Jason Reynolds talk about how important it is, I think would have been really, really helpful for the dialogue, and we couldn't use it. So
that was my first Judy Blume book that I read. Yeah, that was my gateway book. I remember. Yeah.
And who introduced you to Iggy's House? Did you find it, or did someone give it to you?
I think it was just in the library, or it was sort of like I was really into the Ramona Cleary books, and someone was like, "Oh, if you like her." It was like that old-timey version of Netflix's, if you enjoyed this, you'll like this. Right. People were like, oh, if you like Ramona Quimby, Beverly Clearly, if you like those, you'll love Judy Blume. You graduated to the next step. It was like,
the algorithm.
Yes. I do want to take some questions from the audience. If you have one, just raise your hand. Sorry, I can't see great because of the light, but I think I see a hand right there. Go ahead. I might be seeing things. I'm sorry. Just shout it out if you have it.
I'll ask a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job, you guys. I have not read a Judy Blume book, and now I want to go to the library. There better be some there. But my question is, like, Judy was interviewed so much over the years, and I was curious how you were able to get something different out of this interview than in the past.
Good question. How you were able to get something different out of someone who's been interviewed so many times.
Well, in some cases we didn't. I will say that. In some cases, I think it's just we all do it. Like Judy was, we have the narratives we tell about ourselves, and we fall back on them. So I think, that in some cases, and Judy does them so well. So in some cases, we were getting the stories that she's told before, and that was okay. And we, as Leah said, because we had that year, that extra long year of prep time before the very first interview. We were very overly prepared. We had seen all those interviews ahead of time. So we knew what she had talked about in the press. We knew what had been written about her. We had watched it all. We had listened to it all. So we had a sense of what we wanted to talk to her outside of what had been talked about in the past. And we made sure to cover those areas. And to, sometimes we heard something we hadn't heard before, but or sometimes we heard stories told in a new way. And like Leah said, Judy was wanting to talk a lot about her childhood and things like that we had never heard before. And sometimes that would take her to a place that actually, made it into the film, that was relevant somehow to the story we were telling, even though we didn't know it was coming. So, it wasn't 100% like all new revelatory. We were asking her a lot of questions that had been asked of her before, but we tried to just be open to, listen well, be responsive, be conversational, and hope the conversation goes someplace new.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot of new things. I think we have one more right there.
Maybe I have my dates wrong, but so recently we're having these book bans. When you were making the film, you didn't know that was coming down the pike, correct? So did you add that, going, oh wow, we're taking a turn here? Or was it earlier? Am I about the, just about book bans? Was it happening in 2020?
Yeah, did you realize how timely this was? I think you said you didn't, but.
Yeah. I mean, books were being banned when we started in 2020, not at the rate it's probably quadrupled since then. But we knew that they were still being banned and that we wanted to talk about it. Like Leah said, we finished editing in fall 2022. So by that point, over the summer when we were really deep into the edit, into like fine cut, it had already gotten bad. It's so much worse now than it was even over the summer, but it was bad enough then that we knew we needed to address it. So we didn't have to make any like quick last minute changes or go back into it. It sort of worked within our, within our schedule. Things had evolved enough that we knew we needed to have this section about contemporary censorship.
As someone who began as a Judy Blume super fan, and as someone who's come to her work now, what's the one book you would recommend people start with if they wanted to get into Judy Blume and they weren't familiar?
Oh, it depends on who you are, how old you are, who you are. Like it depends. I mean,
do you have a personal favorite?
Tiger Eyes, I think, is the book because I was such an old lady by the time I was reading her books. Like that one is so beautifully written, and it's so profound, the way that Davy, the main character, is experiencing grief and loss and longing and love too, and sort of trying to navigate her mom, who is grieving in her own way. So I think that book is one of my absolute favorites. It doesn't have the humor that most of Judy's books have, and I so appreciate the humor in Judy's writing. But yeah, I would recommend Tiger Eyes to any teenager.
I love Tiger Eyes growing up. It was like, when you're a kid and you imagine the worst thing that could happen, that book sort of went there, but in a way that felt very safe and direct. I loved Deanie as a kid.
That's the one I was
I
gonna
had
say, yeah.
I had minor scoliosis. So like,
Really?
I mean, I couldn't believe there was a book about a kid who had, right? And Margaret, as I said before. And Sheila, I mean, I'm just going to list all the books right now.
Sally J.
yeah,
Friedman,
yeah.
Blubber.
That's another
yeah.
one that we wish we could have spent more time on.
Oh yeah, it's I remember I just reread it about 5 years ago and I couldn't believe how well it holds up. Yeah, I could probably say that about all these books. That's the thing that's so amazing. Well, again, I want to remind everyone that this movie is actually streaming on Amazon Prime now, so you can watch it again and again and recommend it to everyone you know. Thank you so much for being such a great audience. Thank you both so much for being here, and congratulations again on a beautiful movie.
Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you
having
all so
us.
much.